next up from Virios Therapeutics, we have the CEO and chairman of the board of directors, Greg Duncan. Can we please bring Greg in? Greg.
Good morning, or potentially good afternoon to some of the audience. Nice to be with you today.
Good morrow, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. So it's great to have you here on the Small Cap Conference here at Benzinga. For the folks that are not familiar with what you guys are doing over there, could you please give a brief introduction to your company, to yourself, and what you guys are doing?
Sure. So I am the chairman and chief exec, as you mentioned. I've spent roughly coming in on 30 years in the pharmaceutical development industry. Spent 17 years with Pfizer. I had a good fortune of running their U.S. marketing group, their Latina business. Spent a couple of years at UCB, a specialty pharma company, the last 3 of which as an executive committee member. And then took the jump into the private sector, working on development for cystic fibrosis drugs. And I've been in my current position with Virios Therapeutics for a little over a year. Virios Therapeutics, which trades under the ticker VIRI, is focused on how common viruses, specifically the Herpes Simplex 1 virus, which many people are aware of, becomes activated. And that common activated virus engenders an overheated or abnormal immune response, and that immune response serving as a potential catalyst for chronic debilitating diseases. Mm-hmm. Specifically, our focus for today is on fibromyalgia, but we believe this particular antiviral medicine, this combination antiviral medicine, could have a potential utility in other chronic conditions, including irritable bowel syndrome and chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's the upshot, if you will, of the company.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic breakdown. I understood that. So Greg, yeah, I see that you have a presentation here for us today. So I'll go ahead and get out of your way.
Great. We'll be making some forward-looking statements, and as with any company that's raised money, and we IPO'd back in December of 2020, we have substantive documentation on file with the FCC if you'd like to learn more about Virios Therapeutics. Let me start by unpacking the pillars of the presentation I'll cover in the next 13 or 14 minutes. The fibromyalgia marketplace, which, as I mentioned, is the focus of our lead compound, is actually quite a large marketplace, but it's presently very dissatisfied. There are 3 approved drugs to treat fibromyalgia, and all of them come with good pain relief, but significant side effect burden. The reciprocal view is that a large market that's dissatisfied holds very significant commercial potential for a differentiated, new, safe, and effective fibromyalgia treatment. Our lead asset is oral IMC-1. It's a capsule taken twice a day. And we've already demonstrated very significant pain reduction and tolerability benefits in a phase 2A clinical trial. So we've already established proof of concept for this particular thesis, and now we're moving IMC-1 into advanced development. This is a very unique combination, an antiviral combination of proprietary doses of famciclovir, an established product, and celecoxib, or Celebrex as you may know it, at customized doses to treat viral-mediated conditions. And while we think this is impressive and unique, you're probably more impressed to know that the FDA does as well. The FDA has actually conferred Fast Track Review designation for IMC-1 for the treatment of fibromyalgia. To the best of our team's knowledge, that's the first time that's happened in the history of drug development for this particular condition. We are scaling up for a phase 2B trial, which will deliver top-line results in Q2 of next year. And we truly believe, based on our experience and the commercial potential, this could transform patient care for these patients desperate for new therapies. And myself, the rest of the team, and the board of directors have led development and commercialization for many household name drugs, including, as I referenced, 2 of the 3 drugs approved by FDA for this particular treatment. So these jockeys, if you will, have run this race before. So let me talk a little bit about the team. In addition to myself, we have Dr. Genro, our chief medical officer, Angela Walsh, and Ralph Grosswald. Mike was the chief medical officer at Cypress. He developed and launched Savella, which is one of the 3 drugs to treat fibromyalgia. I had the good fortune of managing Lyrica, which is one of those 3 drugs. And Rick Birch, one of our board members, actually launched Lyrica for the treatment of fibromyalgia for Pfizer back during his tenure. We have excellent virology experience at the very top of the organization. On the board of directors, Dr. Whitley and De La Rosa are virologists, extensive drug development experience. And you may be actually familiar with Dr. Whitley. He's actually the data safety monitoring chair for all of the compounds being evaluated by Operation Warp Speed, which you know is targeted at COVID. So a very high-profile virologist, really excited about what we're doing relative to getting activated viruses back to a dormant state and potentially improving health outcomes for fibromyalgia patients and other conditions. We'll talk a little bit about fibromyalgia. It's not necessarily known by everybody, but if you do know somebody with fibromyalgia, you know they are actually quite sick. This is a chronic condition that affects up to 8% of the U.S. population. The hallmark characteristics of this disease are widespread chronic pain and severe fatigue. And when the pain and fatigue are persistent for 3 or more months and we rule out other causes of the pain, we land on a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. Other symptoms include gastrointestinal disorders, sleep disruption, mood disorders, and headache. And as you can imagine, this is quite devastating to patients. Evidence of the debilitating nature of fibromyalgia can be seen in a 3 times greater risk of these patients committing suicide due to the uncontrolled pain and severe fatigue. These patients consume tremendous healthcare resources, and they have very significant disability, as evidenced by the fact that 1 in 2 patients with this disease actually misses work when they get a disease flare-up. Estimates range pretty widely, but we've seen estimates that is as high as 40% of fibromyalgia patients are actually treated with opioids. That's a bad fact. If you know opioids, we're trying to get patients off opioids across the globe and certainly here in the US. And it's made worse in this particular condition because opioid-treated patients are actually documented in the medical literature as having very poor outcomes. There's an opportunity to improve care and potentially do our part in reducing the opioid crisis here in the US and abroad. This is a very large market, as I mentioned, and we believe it's quite well poised for growth if better therapeutic options emerge. And we hope IMC-1 is that option. Low end of the range of estimates in the US, as seen on the left-hand side of slide number 6, suggests that there's about 10 million unique individuals in the US who fit the correct criteria for a fibromyalgia diagnosis. We do see estimates as high as 20 million, but even using the low end of the range, you'll note that only 1 in 3 are diagnosed at present, and worse yet, only 1 in 5, 20%, are treated. So it's a large market, but it's a large market with significant potential because if we can establish a new drug in this space that has a great blend of efficacy and safety that allows more patients to be treated successfully, we can begin to educate the other 6.4 million to get to their doctor to accelerate that discussion and accelerate a diagnosis and maybe get those patients on a therapy that can truly improve their lives. This is a disease that impacts not just US citizens, but citizens around the globe. The fibromyalgia prevalence range estimates from 3 to 6% of the worldwide population. Even using the low end of the range, that's something north of 220 million unique individuals who meet the diagnostic criteria for this particular disorder. Unfortunately, there's a lot of dissatisfaction in the marketplace. Polypharmacy, or utilization of multiple medications, and utilization of unapproved therapies are the normative care standards for these particular patients. Starting on the left-hand side of slide number 7, you'll note of those 2 million patients who are treated in the US, roughly each one of those patients is on 2.6 prescriptions per patient, 2.6 unique medicines. What does that tell us? Well, that tells us there's no one drug doing the job for these patients. What's really astounding is that 75%, fully 3 in 4 prescriptions of medicines prescribed for these patients are for drugs that are actually not approved to treat fibromyalgia. As you know, you probably know that's not illegal. Doctors can prescribe drugs for anything they would like to. But what it really clearly highlights in our mind is that the existing 3 drugs, Cymbalta, Lyrica, and Savella, middle of slide number 7, are not getting the job done for the vast majority of patients. Cymbalta and Lyrica are the category leaders with a roughly 25% share of those 2 million patients. So simple math, about 500,000 people each year are treated with one or the other for the fibromyalgia in the US. This obviously excludes ex-US markets, which would bring those totals even higher. The market research we've done suggests that only 15% of doctors who treat these patients with medication are satisfied with their current treatment. So use of multiple medications, use of off-label therapies suggests very low dissatisfaction with the available treatment choices. We hope to change those levels of satisfaction as we continue to put IMC-1 through its development paces. To give you a sense of the potential opportunity if we continue to see success with this unique antiviral combination, I'll give you just some big math, which I think you'll agree portrays a very significant commercial potential, blockbuster potential, if I can use the industry jargon, for this particular medicine, if successful. If you assume we achieved a 25% patient share, which is what the category leaders have, and you multiply that times $16 a day, which was the cost of Lyrica when it went off patent in 2019, it even took a haircut for the total prescriptions of 40%. So multiply 500,000 times 16 times 0.6. You'll note that the estimated sales for a leading drug in this category are somewhere between $1.7 and $1.8 billion per annum, just for this indication, just in the US. That's before we contemplate addressing the full diagnosed population, and much as we did with Viagra and Zoloft and other successful drugs back during my Pfizer days, once you establish a foothold in the marketplace, establish the value of a new medicine, you then have the financial wherewithal to go educate the market and bring in the full 10 million, and then replicate that commercial model outside of the US. So that's the opportunity that we see. Again, presuming IMC-1 continues to show encouraging results of development. The company was actually founded on a thesis that herpes simplex 1, which I referenced earlier, a very common virus, actually lies dormant in patients' neural ganglia. In simple terms, this is central nervous system tissue. This virus becomes activated by some type of stressor. It could be a medical challenge, it could be stress related to employment in the COVID era. Whatever the stressor is, that dormant virus becomes activated and it begins to replicate. That replicating virus challenges the immune system. What's less well known broadly, but certainly well documented in the medical literature, is that HSV1 or herpes simplex 1 uses cyclooxygenase 2 and cyclooxygenase 1, common prostaglandins, as a bit of a turbo booster to enhance viral replication. So the virus gets activated. Think of the virus as a sports car. It consumes COX-2 and to a lesser extent COX-1 to accelerate its own activation. Hit the gas, turbocharger kicks in. We have excessive speed, or in this case, excessive viral replication. That, we believe, leads to the overheated immune response and the pain and fatigue that are associated with this particular disorder. This is very similar to shingles. You're probably familiar with the disease shingles, where the chickenpox virus that affects people at young ages lies dormant and is controlled by their immune system for a long period of time. But something triggers that virus, it becomes activated, and you see the painful condition known as shingles. Very similar story here, just a different herpes virus, herpes simplex 1 specifically. It may surprise you to know that the World Health estimates that 3.7 billion people across the globe are presently infected today with herpes simplex 1. We see other estimates using PCR testing that suggest something north of 9 in 10 people are infected with HSV1. So we believe this common virus actually probably infects the vast majority of patients with a disease like fibromyalgia or irritable bowel syndrome. And that activated disease is the root cause, if you will, of this particular condition. That's our hypothesis. IMC1 is a synergistic antiviral mechanism that serves as the basis for this fibromyalgia treatment effect we've seen in clinical trials. Specifically, we're combining famciclovir, which inhibits DNA polymerase, one of the components that's required for viral replication, and Celebrex, a COX-2 inhibitor, which binds to the COX-2 pocket and leaves less cyclooxygenase 2 available for consumption by the virus to accelerate its replication. The combination antiviral synergy inhibits viral replication. It allows the immune system to reset, and we see in clinical trials a reduction in pain and fatigue that are the hallmark symptoms of this particular disease. This unique combination, this synergistic combination, has been granted intellectual property protection to 2033. So very exciting for the future of this particular compound. I'd like to share with you the data that has the community so excited and hopefully is generating interest amongst you as you consider a potential investment in Virios Therapeutics. But to put that data in context, let me share with you a very simple overview of the phase 2A clinical trial that we've completed to date. This was a classic randomized, double-blind, multi-center, placebo-controlled trial executed here in the US using 12 sites where we compared IMC1, this combination of famciclovir and celecoxib, versus placebo, both dosed twice a day over the course of 16 weeks of treatment. Patients were randomized either to IMC1 or placebo, and then they were treated consistently on a daily basis for those full 16 weeks, with office visits at their baseline at week 6, week 12, and week 16. And week 16 is the key week where we do the statistics on the outcomes that you see in this trial. There are a number of pain endpoints that are used to assess fibromyalgia medications, and specifically we use 2 co-primaries here to measure pain reduction, including the endpoint that is key for FDA approval of drugs in this particular category. And we showed statistically significant improvement on these particular endpoints, but also looked at a whole host of other secondary endpoints, which I'll share with you in the coming slides. I'm very pleased to tell you what's got the medical community quite excited is that IMC1 demonstrated statistically significant reduction in pain on both primary endpoints. The NRS 24-hour recall, which is a pain assessment that asks patients on a scale of 0 to 10, how does your pain compare to when you started the trial? And then the FIQR 7-day recall, which asks patients again on week 6, week 12, and week 16, how does your pain compare to when you started the trial? But in this case, how does it compare over the last 7 days, not just during the office visit? To put these statistically significant reductions in pain in perspective, using the 24-hour recall, the last drug that was approved by FDA showed a 0.4 unit change versus placebo. Here we're showing a 0.8 unit change. And while I hasten to add these are not head-to-head trials, we're actually quite surprised at the magnitude of effect on the efficacy. You can see this is a drug that doesn't work the first time you take the dose. Not like an opioid, which is going to reduce pain day 1, but actually confer poor outcomes over time. This drug takes a little bit longer to work, but you can see at week 6, we see a numeric effect. At week 12, we see statistically significant effects. And at week 16, we see a very durable pain reduction effect using this antiviral combination known as IMC-1. In addition, key secondary outcomes at 16 weeks are equally encouraging. We see reductions in fatigue. We see improvement in patients' overall global health. We saw improvement across all domains of a diagnostic that's used to assess fibromyalgia specifically. And we actually saw less use of rescue medication. In this particular trial, we allowed patients to top up with low-dose opioids to control their pain if they weren't getting adequate pain response either from IMC-1 or the placebo. And what's incredible here is that we saw statistically significantly lower utilization of opioid sparing, if you will, for the IMC-1 group versus placebo. We saw a very important numeric and statistically significant benefits across a whole host of other symptoms, and specifically saw statistically significant reductions in patients' stiffness related to their pain, improvements in sleep quality, reductions in depression, and highly statistically significant reductions in anxiety, a key hallmark symptom of this particular disorder. So really terrific pain reduction, and a battery or other outcomes assessment shows improved global health status really consistently across the board. What's equally important, and our chief medical officer would tell you is his favorite thing about this particular drug candidate, is that IMC-1 had lower discontinuation rates versus placebo in this trial. Traditionally in fibromyalgia treatment work, Lyrica, Cymbalta, Savella, you see that the active drug component has a higher discontinuation rate due to adverse events. What we saw in this trial was actually the opposite, and is quite astounding. We saw that placebo patients dropped out at a 3 times greater risk due to adverse events as compared with IMC-1. That was statistically significant lower dropout due to adverse events on IMC-1. The upshot of that is better tolerability. And as I started with the presentation today, the primary reason for the rampant dissatisfaction in this drug category amongst patients, prescribers, and in fact payers is actually poor tolerability. Patients can get some pain relief, but they can't stay on this medication for a long time. And it's important because this is a chronic medication, and patients need to be able to take that medication for the rest of their lives.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
We are at time, so final remarks.
Sure. IMC-1 is progressing into phase 2B using optimized doses. The trial will start in the next couple days, and we will actually see patients recruited to the balance of this year with top-line results in June of 2022. And so we're really excited about the potential to change not just patient care, which is critically important for 200 million patients, but to have a very serious value inflection point within the next 15 months. The upshot of today's discussion is we have a large market, which is quite readily addressable. We have a very unique approach to treating these patients, supported by data, and we have a team that knows this category well, having developed and or commercialized 2 of the 3 drugs in the space. Thank you for your time and attention.
Greg, thank you so much. And where can folks get in contact with your organization if they have more questions?
You can simply contact us on Virios.com, which is our website. You can email questions to our website. We are quite urgent about following up on those requests. And obviously all of the press releases and publications and the data that support today's presentation are listed on the website. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Greg, for being here with us today. Thank you for the time and attention. We appreciate it. All right, guys, that was Virios. Check them out. Greg Duncan, CEO.